Okay, good evening. I hope you guys are okay. So we're going to be talking about hormones today in our physiology class. So this is a subsection of the endocrine physiology that we are looking at. Okay, so today we're going to do the hormone part of the endocrine system. So what is a hormone? What do you understand when you hear the term hormone? Let us take a moment and try to just think around it. So what comes to your mind when you hear the term hormone? Okay. So when you talk about a hormone, these are simply chemical messengers that are synthesized by endocrine glands. Okay. So based on the chemical nature, you find that hormones can be classified in different ways, but mainly we classify them in three ways. So the first way that we classify hormones is the steroids. Okay, so we have steroid hormones, we have protein hormones, then we also have hormones which are derivatives of amino acids that we call as tyrosine. Okay, so these are the three classification types of hormones. Okay, so we have steroid hormones, protein hormones, and we have the third one being the derivatives of amino acid called tyrosine. Okay, so when you talk about this steroid hormone, what exactly are they? So steroid hormones, um, they are hormones that are synthesized from cholesterol or its derivatives. So as we know, cholesterol is a type of lipid. Okay, so these hormones are specifically derived from a specific lipid known as cholesterol. Okay, so cholesterol and its derivatives are the ones that form this type of hormone. And then you find that most of these hormones, they are secreted by the adrenal cortex. Okay, so the adrenal cortex just around your kidney, we have the adrenal glands. So at those adrenal glands, now the cortex part of them, you'll find that these are secreted. Also in the gonads as well as in the placenta, you'll find these are areas where steroid hormones are synthesized or secreted. Okay. So aside from this, we also have examples of these steroid hormones. So when talk about some examples of steroid hormones, we have examples such as aldosterone, we have cortisol, testosterone. Okay, so estrogen, progesterone, all these are some of the common examples that you can give under steroid hormones. Okay, so I hope this part is clear. Okay, so these are examples of the steroid hormones. And we have 11-deoxycholesterol, we have corticosterone. Okay, so all these are some of the examples. But the most common that you find aldosterone, cortisol, estrogen, progesterone. These are hormones that you talk about in your day-to-day life because you encounter them on several occasions. Okay, then we have protein hormones. So these protein hormones, they are large or small peptides, and they are secreted by the pituitary gland. And you can also find them being secreted by the parathyroid glands, the pancreas, as well as the placenta. So we term these as the P's. Okay, so protein hormones are secreted by the P's, the placenta, the pancreas, the parathyroid, the pituitary gland. So all these secrete the protein hormones. Then we have the third classification, which is the tyrosine derivatives. So for the tyrosine derivatives, we have two types of hormones. Okay, so namely we have the thyroid hormones as well as the adrenal medullary hormones that are derived from the amino acid tyrosine. So hormones like the thyroxine, triiodothyronine, the epinephrine, norepinephrine, dopamine, which are secreted from the medullary, the adrenal medulla, you find that these are the hormones that make up the tyrosine derivatives. Then examples of proteins, of hormones that are proteins in nature. So we have things like the growth hormone, we have the thyroid stimulating hormone, adrenocorticotropin hormone, we have follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, prolactin, oxytocin, we have antidiuretic hormone, all these, calcitonin, insulin, glucagon. Okay, so these are examples of these three classifications of hormones. Okay, so how do these hormones, quite all right, we have known that this is the classification. So now how does a hormone perform its action? So what is the mechanism of action? What do they do exactly for them to perform their function? So we are going to look at hormone action. Okay, so under hormone action, you find that hormones don't really particularly act directly on the target cell. They have to combine to a certain receptor that is present on the cell that they're targeting. And once they bind to that receptor, they will end up forming something that we call as a hormone receptor complex. So this hormone receptor complex, it induces the various changes and reactions that will happen in that target cell. So this is how they act. Okay, so these hormone receptors, they are large proteins that are present on each target cell. So you find that each cell has thousands of these receptors. So important characteristic features of the receptors is that each receptor is specific for one single hormone. Okay, so if it's a receptor that is responsive to growth hormone, it is going to just be responsive to growth hormone and not to prolactin. Okay, so each receptor can combine with only one hormone. Take note of that. So it's because of this you find that a hormone can act on a target cell only if the target cell has the receptor for that particular hormone. Okay, so it doesn't just act on any receptor as long as it's a receptor, but it's specific. So you find that these hormone receptors are situated in various areas. So where are these hormone receptors situated? So these are situated either in a cell membrane or in the cytoplasm or in the nucleus of the target cell. Okay, so you find that if it's in the cell membrane, the receptors of the protein hormones and the adrenal medullary hormones like the catecholamines, they are situated in the cell membrane. Then hormone receptors that are located in the cytoplasm, you find that steroid hormone receptors are situated in the cytoplasm. Then for the nucleus, the receptors of thyroid hormones are found in this nucleus. So we've said the three places in which you can find the hormone receptors: the cell membrane, the cytoplasm, and the nucleus. And depending on the hormone that you are looking at, you find the receptors are found in different specific areas. Okay. All right. So how are these hormone receptors regulated? So regulation of these hormone receptors, you find that these receptors, they are not static components of the cell, and you find that their number increases or decreases in various conditions depending on how favorable it is at that point. So you find that generally when a hormone is secreted in excess, the number of receptors of those receptors that are responsive to that specific hormone will decrease. So the hormone has increased, the receptors will decrease due to binding of the hormone with the receptor. So it's like the hormone is in excess, but the receptors are less. So this process is what we call a down regulation. Okay, so when the receptors are less and the hormones are more, we call this a down regulation. But we have a situation where there is a deficiency of the hormone, but the number of receptors have increased. So in such a situation, we call it as up regulation. Okay, so this is called up regulation. So that is about down regulation and up regulation of hormone receptors. So you find this is what we've talked about. Let me just show this. Okay. So these are some of this diagram is showing us the different locations of these hormone receptors. So you can see here we have the nuclear receptor, then we have the one which is the membrane receptors, we have the cytoplasm receptors. Okay, so this diagram basically is explaining what I've just said. Okay. So hormone in the form of hormone receptor complex, you find that it will enter the target cell by means of endocytosis and it executes the actions. So the whole process is simply called internalization. Okay, so we call this whole process internalization, where this hormone receptor complex is formed, then it is endocytosed and it now performs its function. So after internalization, you find that some receptors can be recycled or they can be degraded. Okay, but it takes time to form these new receptors. So the receptor numbers are going to eventually decrease after the action has taken place and they are degraded. Okay, so those are some of the things that happen. So now, what is the mechanism of action of these hormones? So how do hormones act? So hormones, as we say, do not act directly on the target cell. So it has to combine with a receptor to form a hormone receptor complex. So this complex that it forms, it's the one that executes the hormonal action by any one of the following mechanisms. So after now you formed this complex, what happens next? So there are three mechanisms that a hormone can follow or undergo. So we have the first one being by altering permeability of the cell membrane. The second one by activating intracellular enzymes, and thirdly by acting on genes. Okay, so these are some of the three mechanism of action by hormones. So what do we mean exactly when we talk about altering permeability of the cell membrane? So what is this? So by altering permeability of the cell membrane, what we simply mean is that the neurotransmitters in the synapse or the neuromuscular junction act by changing the permeability of the postsynaptic membrane. Okay, so for example, in a neuromuscular junction, right? When an impulse or an action potential reaches the axon terminal of the motor nerve, you find that acetylcholine is released from the vesicles. So acetylcholine increases the permeability of the postsynaptic membrane for sodium. So it does this by opening the ligand-gated sodium channels. So you find that sodium ions will start entering the neuromuscular junction from the extracellular fluid through the channels and cause the development of the end plate potential. Okay, so this has to go back to, you have to look back to your action potential, how it is generated for you to understand this. So it alters the membrane permeability by either increasing or decreasing the number of ions that can go in and out of that cell. So this is about alteration of permeability. Okay, then we have the next one being by activating intracellular enzymes. So how does this happen? So you find that proton hormones and the catecholamines, they act by activating the intracellular enzymes. So how does this take place? So this This diagram summarizes a lot of what happens in this stage. So what happens is that we have what we call as the first messenger, the second messenger, cyclic AMP, and so throughout this, we're going to look at these stages. So let's talk about the first messenger. So for a first messenger, it is the hormone which acts on the target cell. Okay, the hormone that acts on the target cell is called the first messenger. Okay, so we call this either a first messenger or a chemical mediator. So it combines with the receptor and forms the hormone receptor complex. So the hormone that comes and binds to this receptor. Okay. Then we have the second messenger. So the second messenger is the hormone receptor complex that activates the enzymes of the cell and causes the formation of another substance that we call as this second messenger. Okay, so after the complex has been formed, you'll find that it causes the formation of another substance within the cell, which we call as the second messenger or the intracellular hormonal mediator. So this second messenger, it produces the effects of the hormone inside the cells. So you find that protein hormones and the catecholamines, they act through this second messenger kind of action. And most common second messengers are cyclic AMP. So no wonder we talked about cyclic AMP, or that's why we're going to look at it. So this is what happens. So this diagram, you see that what happens here is that there is a sequence of events that are leading to the formation of cyclic AMP. So we have the hormone that binds with the receptor in the cell membrane, and it forms the hormone receptor complex. So you can see it forms the hormone receptor complex, which is this one. So this is the hormone up here. Then it comes and binds with this down here. Okay, let me just do this. So we have this hormone right here, and we have this receptor down here. So when these two combine, they'll come and form this hormone receptor complex. Okay, so after formation of this, you find that it activates the G protein. So the G protein is activated, which is this part here. So this G protein, when it is activated, it will release GDP. It will release GDP from alpha GDP. Okay, so it will release GDP from alpha GDP unit. Okay, so this is what happens here. So after this, you find that the alpha subunit now binds with a new molecule of GTP, though here it's not really shown. So I'll start from this side. I want us to get to understand first what this GTP, how this GTP comes. So you find that we have what we call as the G proteins. Okay, so the G proteins are the membrane proteins, that are situated in the inner surface of the cell membrane. So inside this cell membrane, you can see this structure here is what we are calling as the G protein. Okay, so these proteins, they play an important role in the formation of cyclic AMP. So the goal is for us to reach this point where we form cyclic AMP. Okay, so that is where we are going. So now what happens here is that each G protein molecule is made up of 3 subunits. Okay, so it is made up of 3 subunits. The subunits that we are talking about are these ones right here. So it's made up of this. So it's made up of a beta, gamma, and alpha subunit. Okay, so these are the subunits that it's made up of. Then this alpha, the alpha subunit, it is responsible for most of the biological actions. So it is bound with the GDP, which is guanosine diphosphate. You can see here, this alpha is bonding to this other one just here, the GDP. Okay, so what happens? It forms an alpha GDP unit. Okay, so it forms an alpha GDP unit, and then the alpha subunit is also having the intrinsic enzyme activity called as GT pace. Okay, activity. So the GT pace activity. While these beta and gamma subunits, they always bind together to form the beta gamma dimer. Okay, the beta gamma dimer. So they form the beta gamma dimer, and this one, it also helps in bringing about some action in this cell. So in the inactivated G protein, which is this one, you find that both the alpha GDP unit and the beta gamma dimer, they are united, as you can see here. So this one is inactivated before the hormone binds here. It is inactive. But once it binds, it becomes active. Okay, so once the hormone binds, it activates this G protein, and the G protein, you find that it releases the GDP. Okay, so it releases the GDP, and from the alpha it will release the alpha GDP, and from there you find that it forms alpha GTP. Okay, so it forms this alpha GTP. So this is how this one is coming about. So the alpha subunit now binds with a new molecule of GTP, and this exchange, you'll find that it triggers the dissociation of alpha GTP with the unit. Remember, they were attached with the beta gamma dimer. They will separate, okay, after the alpha has attached to the GTP. Notice that it has changed from GDP, it has gone from diphosphate to triphosphate. So once it becomes a triphosphate, it detaches from the beta gamma dimer. Okay. So you find that both the alpha GTP unit and the beta gamma dimer are now active. Okay, they will act as second messenger pathways. Okay, so the alpha GTP units will activate now the enzyme adenyl cyclase, which is this one. Adenyl cyclase will be activated by alpha GTP. Okay, which is also present in the cell membrane. So most of the adenyl cyclase protrudes into the cytoplasm. So it will go now into the cytoplasm of the cell from the inner surface of the cell membrane. Okay, so now this activated adenyl cyclase will convert the adenosine triphosphate of the cytoplasm, which is the ATP, into cyclic AMP. So the ATP will be converted by this adenyl cyclase to CAMP, which is CAMP. Okay. So when the action is over, you find that alpha subunit, it hydrolyzes. The attached GTP will change to GDP by its GT-pace and GT-pace activity. So this is what happens. Okay, so now the action of this cyclic AMP. So you find that this cyclic AMP, it executes the action of the hormone inside the cell by stimulating the enzymes like protein kinase A. Okay, and it also produces the response depending upon the function of the target cells through these enzymes. So this is what this cyclic AMP will come and do. Okay, so we have other second messengers like calcium ion, calmodulin. Okay, we have inositol triphosphate. We have several other second messengers aside from CAMP. Okay, but for CAMP, this is what it simply does. Okay, so cyclic AMP produces one or more of the following responses, whereby it causes contraction, relaxation of muscle fibers, alteration in the permeability of the cell membrane. You find that it's used in synthesis of substances in the cell, secretion or releasing of substances by the target cell, other physiological activities of the target cell. Okay, so this is what it basically does. And we have talked about second messengers, other second messengers. But this, we talked about this in first semester, where you had to look at action potential and how all that happens. Then remember, we're still talking about the mechanism of action of hormones. And this was just the second way in which hormones act, and this is activating intracellular enzymes. So we've talked about the enzymes, like protein kinase is being activated by cyclic AMP, which is the second messenger. I hope this is clear. If there are any questions, feel free to ask. Okay, then the third way in which enzymes act is by acting on the genes. Okay, acting on the genes. So you find that the thyroid and steroid hormones, they execute their functions by acting on the genes in the target cells. So there is in this figure below, that is showing us how exactly this happens. Okay, so this is it. So you find that the sequence of events during activation of these genes, the hormone, you can see this hormone, it enters the interior of the cell and binds with receptors in the cytoplasm. Okay, so it binds with receptors in the cytoplasm. You can see we are in the cytoplasm. Okay, so after it binds with these receptors, it can also bind with receptors in the nucleus, like the thyroid hormone, and it forms the hormone receptor complex. And then this hormone receptor complex will move towards the DNA and binds with DNA. So you can see here, it moves after, let me just do this. So after this complex has been formed here, right? After the addition of that, then we have this complex formed. Then it moves towards DNA, going towards the DNA. Okay, so the hormone receptor complex moves towards the DNA and binds to the DNA. So it binds to this DNA. So this increases the transcription of mRNA. So this will increase transcription of mRNA, and then the mRNA will now move out of the nucleus. It will move out of the nucleus and it reaches the ribosomes and activates them. So it goes outside and goes to the ribosomes, then activates them. Okay, so after the activation of these ribosomes, you find that the activated ribosomes now will produce large quantities of proteins. Okay, so we'll start producing large quantities of proteins. Remember the function of ribosomes, where protein synthesis takes place. Okay, so these proteins now, they'll produce a physiological response in the target cell. Now, that's how this response comes into play. So this is basically what you have to know about hormones. Okay, so we've talked about what a hormone is, the types of hormones, examples of these types of hormones. Then aside from that, we've also talked about the mechanism of action of these hormones, the three mechanisms of actions. Okay, thank you so much for being part of this lesson. So I'm going to see you guys in our next class. I hope you guys will stay glued. Okay, have a good and blessed evening. Thank you.